The setup, the invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock, embossed with gold lettering that probably cost more than Maya's monthly coffee budget. Eleanor Walsh cordially invites you to the annual Children's Hospital Benefit Gala, it read. And beneath that, in Connor's familiar handwriting, +1, Maya Chun. Maya traced the elegant script with her paint-stained fingertip, a small smile playing at her lips. After 8 months of dating Connor, this felt like progress. His mother had been a mysterious figure, mentioned in passing but never encountered. Like some mythical creature who lived in the upper echelons of society where Maya had never ventured. So, what's the dress code for meeting your mother? Maya called from the kitchen of Connor's downtown apartment, where she was attempting to make dinner from his sparse, organized pantry. Everything in Connor's space had its place from his. Alphabetized law books to his perfectly pressed shirts, hanging in color-coordinated rows. Connor emerged from his home office, loosening his tie with that particular gesture that meant he was transitioning from lawyer mode to boyfriend mode. "It's black tie," he said, settling onto one of his pristine bar stools. "But Maya, we should probably talk about the gala." Something in his tone made her pause, wooden spoon halfway to her mouth for a taste test. Talk about what? Whether the first can manage not to embarrass you in front of high society? That's not what I meant. But his slight wince suggested it wasn't entirely wrong either. It's just ... My mother's events are very formal, very traditional. The guest list includes judges, senators, major donors. There are certain expectations. Maya set down the spoon and turned to face him fully. Connor was beautiful in that clean-cut, all-American way that had first caught her attention at the gallery opening where they'd met. She'd been explaining her latest installation, a chaotic explosion of color and texture about urban loneliness, when he'd approached with genuine curiosity and intelligent questions. He'd seemed fascinated by her passion, her willingness to pour herself completely into her art. "What kind of expectations?" she asked carefully. Connor ran a hand through his dark hair, messing it up in a way that would have horrified his mother. "Well, there will be photographers from the society pages, and the conversations tend to be about ... certain topics. Charity work, cultural events, that sort of thing. As opposed to my usual dinner party topics of why the public school system is failing my students and whether landlords should be allowed to raise rent 20% in 1 year. Maya," his voice carried a gentle warning, "I'm not asking you to be someone else. I'm just saying maybe we could prepare a little. I could brief you on some of the attendees, suggest some safe conversation topics." She studied his face, looking. For the man who had spent an entire Sunday helping her paint a mural at the community center, who had listened to her rant about arts funding cuts while making her pancakes the next morning. "Safe conversation topics," she repeated slowly. "And maybe ... He hesitated, clearly sensing dangerous territory. "Maybe something a little more conservative to wear? You have great style, but Mother's crowd is pretty traditional." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. Traditional meaning what? Exactly? You know, classic, elegant, understated. The words hung between them like a challenge. Maya thought of her closet, filled with vintage finds, bold patterns, and pieces that told stories. Her grandmother's silk scarf from Hong Kong, the leather jacket she'd bought with her first teaching paycheck, the flowing dress she'd worn to Connor's office party, the one that had made him pull her close and whisper that she was the most interesting person in the room. "I see," she said quietly. "So for 8 months, you've been dating me, loud, opinionated, unstated me. But now that I'm meeting your mother, I should become someone else. That's not fair, Maya. You know how much I care about you." Connor stood up, moving closer. "I'm just trying to help you navigate this world. It matters to me what they think, because they're my family. And what about what I think? What I'm comfortable with? Of course that matters too. But this one night, couldn't you just try to fit in a little? For me? Maya looked at him, really looked at him, at his expensive suit and his worried expression, and his genuine belief that asking her to shrink herself was somehow reasonable. She thought about all the time she'd watched her own mother adapt herself to fit other people's expectations, how it had worn her down year by year until Maya wasn't sure who her mother actually was underneath all the adjustments. Let me get this straight, Maya said, her voice deadly calm. You fell in love with a woman who wears vintage band t-shirts to art galleries and argues with cab drivers about politics. But for your mother's party, you want me to dress like someone else, talk like someone else, and basically be someone else. Do I have that right? Connor's silence was answer enough. Maya turned back to the stove, stirring the sauce with more force than necessary. I'll think about it, she said, which they both knew meant she would do exactly what she always did. Exactly. What felt right to her? Consequences be damned. The question was whether Connor was ready for that answer. The preparation 3 days later, Maya found herself standing in the most expensive department store she'd ever entered, surrounded by black dresses that all looked like variations on the same theme. Safe, boring, and utterly forgettable. Stella Rodriguez, her best friend and voice of reason, held up a particularly conservative number with long sleeves and a neckline that could have been worn to a funeral. This one screams, I have no personality and pose no threat to anyone, Stella said dryly, her photographer's eye taking in the dress with professional disdain. Perfect for blending into the wallpaper. Maya fingered the fabric, trying to imagine herself in it. Connor's been texting me articles about proper gala etiquette. Apparently, I need to know the difference between a salad fork and a dessert fork, and I should never, under any circumstances, discuss politics, religion, or anything remotely controversial. So basically, you should be a well-dressed mute. Pretty much. Maya sank onto the boutique's velvet bench, suddenly exhausted. Stell, what if I'm not cut out for this? What if Connor's right, and I really don't belong in his world? Stella abandoned the dress rack and sat beside her friend. At 28, Stella had the kind of confidence that came from years of photographing people from all walks of life, from street artists to CEOs. She'd met Connor several times and had never quite warmed to him, though she'd kept her opinions mostly to herself. Maya Chun, Stella said firmly, you are the woman who convinced the school board to fund a new arts program by showing up to their meeting with 15 of your students and their artwork. You're the one who talked that gallery owner into giving young artists their first show. You've never met a cause you wouldn't fight for, or a person you wouldn't stand up for. Since when do you worry about belonging anywhere? Maya's phone buzzed with another text from Connor. This one contained a photo of his parents at last year's gala, standing with a group of elegantly dressed couples, all looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread for how to look wealthy and untouchable. Since I fell in love with someone whose mother probably has opinions about my student loan debt and my tendency to buy groceries at the discount market, Maya muttered, showing Stella the photo. Stella studied the image, her expression growing more skeptical by the second. Maya, look at these people. Really look at them. Do any of them look like they've ever had a genuine conversation about anything that matters? Do they look like they've ever worried about paying rent, or whether their students have enough supplies, or if their neighbor's kid is getting enough to eat? That's not fair. Connor cares about those things. Does he? Or does he care about them in an abstract, write a check and feel good way? Before Maya could answer, her phone rang. Connor's name flashed on the screen, and she answered without thinking. Hey, his voice came through, slightly distorted by what sounded like a conference room full of people. Sorry, I'm between meetings, but I wanted to catch you before you bought anything. Dad called this morning with some additional thoughts about the gala. Maya's stomach dropped. Additional thoughts? Well, he mentioned that there will be several major donors there who are considering funding the new children's wing. Apparently, first impressions are crucial for these kinds of relationships. He suggested maybe keeping the conversation light and positive. Focus on shared interests rather than divisive topics. Stella rolled her eyes so hard, Maya was surprised they didn't fall out of her head. Divisive topics like what, Connor? Oh, just maybe avoid mentioning your work with the teachers' union or the protests you organized last month. Some of these people have strong feelings about public education funding. Maya felt her face flush. Strong feelings against properly funding education for children? It's not that simple, Maya. It's about fiscal responsibility and, Connor, Maya's voice cut through his explanation. Are you asking me to hide the fact that I'm a teacher? That I believe kids deserve art supplies and small class sizes and teachers who aren't working 3 jobs to pay rent? There was a pause, filled with the sound of Connor's colleagues talking in the background. Of course not. I'm just saying maybe we could frame it differently. You could talk about how rewarding it is to work with children, how much you love seeing them create. Focus on the positive aspects. The positive aspects, Maya repeated slowly, as opposed to the negative aspects, like fighting for basic resources and fair wages. Maya, please, this is important to me. These people could make real changes happen, but only if they see us as allies, not adversaries. Stella was now making exaggerated gagging motions, which would have been funny if Maya hadn't felt like crying. I have to go, Connor. I'll call you later. She hung up before he could respond and stared at her phone, feeling like she was looking at a stranger's number. Well, Stella said after a moment, that settles it. We're definitely not buying the funeral dress. Maya looked up at her friend, confused. What do you mean? I mean you're going to that gala as exactly who you are. Maya Chun, the woman who fights for her students, who creates beautiful things, who makes people think and feel and question their assumptions. If Connor's family can't handle that, then maybe Connor isn't the man you thought he was. But what if I lose him? Stella stood up and pulled Maya to her feet. Baby girl, if being yourself costs you a relationship, then it wasn't worth having in the first place. Now, come on. Let's find you a dress that makes you feel like the warrior goddess you actually are, not the wallflower they want you to become. As they walked deeper into the store, Maya's phone buzzed with one more message from Connor. Everything okay? You sounded upset. Remember, this is just one night. After this, everything goes back to normal. Maya stared at the text for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Because suddenly, she wasn't sure she wanted things to go back to normal at all. The confrontation at the Riverside Country Club looked like something out of a movie about old money and older secrets. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over women in designer gowns and men in perfectly tailored tuxedos, all of them moving through. The evening, with the practiced ease of people who had never doubted their place in the world, Maya stood at the entrance in the dress she and Stella had finally chosen, a deep emerald green that brought out her eyes with clean lines that were elegant without being boring. It was beautiful, expensive, and completely appropriate. It was also not quite her, and she felt the discomfort of that compromise with every step. Connor appeared at her elbow, handsome and nervous in his tuxedo. You look incredible, he said, though she caught him giving her dress a quick, assessing glance as if checking for any potential problems. Thank you, she replied, smoothing her hands over the silk. Though I have to admit, I keep waiting for someone to realize I don't belong here. Don't be ridiculous. You belong wherever I am. But even as he said it, Connor was scanning the room, cataloging the guests, his lawyer's mind already working on damage control for conversations that hadn't happened yet. Eleanor Walsh materialized. beside them as if summoned by some invisible butler. She was exactly what Maya had expected, tall, silver-haired, and possessed of the kind of understated elegance that came from generations of good breeding and better investments. Her smile was warm and practiced, the kind that could mean anything. Or nothing. "You must be Maya," Eleanor said, extending a manicured hand. "Connor has told me so much about you." Maya shook her hand, noting the firmness of the grip and the way Eleanor's eyes took inventory of everything from her jewelry to her posture. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Walsh. Thank you for including me tonight." "Of course, dear. Any friend of Connor's is welcome." The emphasis on friend was so subtle that Maya almost missed it. Almost. "Now, you simply must meet some of the other guests. Margaret Thornfield is here. She's on the hospital board, and Dr. Sarah. Kim, our keynote speaker." Before Maya could respond, she found herself being guided through the crowd, Connor trailing behind like an anxious shadow. Eleanor moved through the room like a general reviewing troops, stopping to air kiss and exchange pleasantries with a seemingly endless parade of people whose names all seemed to end 3 or Junior. "Margaret, darling," Eleanor said, approaching a woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice and dressed by someone with unlimited funds and limited imagination. "I'd like you to meet Maya Chun, Connor's friend." Margaret Thornfield looked Maya up and down with the kind of thoroughness usually reserved for livestock auctions. "How lovely. And what do you do, dear?" "I'm a teacher," Maya said, choosing her words carefully. "I work with middle school students, focusing on arts education." "How ... "Noble," Margaret said, her tone suggesting that nobility was not necessarily a virtue. "Public school, I assume?" "Yes, Roosevelt Middle School on the South Side." The temperature in their small circle seemed to drop several degrees. Margaret exchanged a look with Eleanor that Maya couldn't quite decipher, but definitely didn't like. "Well," Margaret continued, "I suppose someone has to do it. Though I do worry about the state of public education these days. All that union nonsense and political correctness. It's not like when we were young, when teachers knew their place and stuck to the basics." Maya felt Connor's hand tighten on her elbow, a warning pressure that made her jaw clench. "Actually," she said, keeping her voice level, "I think teachers today are doing incredible work under difficult circumstances. Most of us are spending our own money on supplies and working extra hours to make sure our students get the attention they deserve." "Oh my," Margaret said, her eyebrows rising in apparent surprise. "How unfortunate that you feel the need to supplement your duties in that way. Perhaps better budgeting would solve that problem." Maya opened her mouth to respond, but Connor stepped forward smoothly. "Maya's very passionate about her work," he said, his tone light, but his grip on her arm still firm. "But enough shop talk. Margaret, how is your grandson doing at Harvard?" The conversation moved on, flowing over Maya like water around a stone. She found herself nodding and smiling at appropriate intervals, while Margaret regaled them with stories of her grandson's academic achievements and her daughter's charity work. When Dr. Sarah Kim joined their group, Maya perked up, hoping for a more substantive conversation. Dr. Kim was younger than the others, probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "I understand you work in education," she said to Maya. "That must be incredibly rewarding." "It is," Maya said, grateful for the genuine interest. "Especially when you see a kid discover they have artistic talent they never knew existed. Art can be transformative for young people, particularly those dealing with difficult circumstances." "Absolutely. In my work at the hospital, I see how creative therapies can help children process trauma and find their voices." "Are you able to incorporate mental health awareness into your curriculum?" Maya's face lit up. Finally, someone who understood. "We try to, though it's challenging with limited resources." I've been pushing for more counseling support and trauma-informed teaching practices, but the funding just isn't there. The district keeps cutting programs while class sizes get bigger and Maya. Connor's voice cut through her sentence like a blade. Perhaps we should let Dr. Kim tell us about her keynote speech. The interruption was so abrupt, so obviously intended to shut her down, that Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. Dr. Kim looked confused, glancing between them as if trying to understand what had just happened. Actually, Dr. Kim said slowly, I was very interested in what Maya was saying. It sounds like you're dealing with many of the same systemic issues we face in healthcare. But Margaret had already seized control of the conversation again. Oh, you teachers and your complaints about funding, she said with a laugh that held no humor. In my day, educators were simply grateful to have steady employment. All this activism and demanding more money, it's quite unseemly, don't you think? Perhaps if you focused more on teaching and less on political agendas, the children would be better served. Maya felt something snap inside her chest. She looked at Connor, waiting for him to say something, to defend her, to acknowledge that Margaret had just insulted both her and her profession. Instead, she saw him glance around nervously, clearly hoping the conversation would move on to safer ground. I'm sorry, Maya said, her voice perfectly controlled, but carrying an edge that made everyone in the circle pay attention. Did you just suggest that advocating for my students' needs is a political agenda? Margaret's smile grew sharper. My dear, I'm simply suggesting that perhaps you should know your place. Teaching is a service profession. There's honor in that, but it doesn't require making waves or causing drama. Surely you understand that? Know your place. The words hung in the air like a slap. Maya felt 8 months of small compromises swallowed. Arguments and diminished expectations crystallize into this single moment. She looked at Connor, who was staring at his shoes. She looked at Eleanor, whose expression was carefully neutral. She looked at Dr. Kim, who seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. And then Maya made a choice. You're absolutely right, she said, her voice carrying just far enough to catch the attention of nearby guests. I should know my place. And my place is standing up for kids who don't have anyone else fighting for them. My place is making sure teenagers know they matter, that their voices count, that they deserve art and music and books and teachers who see their potential instead of their zip code. Margaret's face had gone rigid. How passionate. Yes, Maya said, stepping closer. I am passionate. I'm passionate about 12-year-olds who come to school hungry because their parents are working 3 jobs and still can't make rent. I'm passionate about kids who think they're stupid because no one ever bothered to figure out they learn differently. I'm passionate about fighting a system that writes off entire communities and then acts surprised when those communities struggle. She was aware that their conversation had drawn a larger audience, that other guests were turning to listen. Connor looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. And you know what else I'm passionate about? Maya continued, her voice steady and clear. I'm passionate about people who have never worried about money or health care, or whether their kid's school has enough textbooks, not lecturing those of us who live in the real world about knowing our place. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Eleanor stepped forward, her hostess instincts clearly warring with her desire to handle what was rapidly becoming a scene. Perhaps we should, Eleanor began. No, Maya said, turning to face Connor's mother directly. I think it's time we were honest about what this evening is really about. This isn't about children's health care or charity or helping anyone. This is about people with money feeling good about themselves while making sure nothing actually changes. And heaven forbid someone like me, someone who actually works with these kids every day, should have an opinion about what they need. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, could sense the collective intake of breath from people who had never heard anyone speak this way at one of Eleanor's events. Connor finally looked up from his shoes, his face a mask of mortification and anger. "Maya," he said quietly, "I think we should go." "Yes," she said, meeting his eyes steadily. "I think we should." Asterisk the rebellion, but Maya didn't move toward the exit. Instead, she turned away from Connor and walked deeper into the crowd, leaving him standing there with his mother and her friends. She could hear Eleanor making smooth excuses behind her, something about young people and their enthusiasm. But Maya was done caring about Eleanor's damage control. She found herself at the bar, where a young man in a crisp white shirt was polishing glasses with the kind of mechanical precision that spoke of long hours and aching feet. His name tag read, "Tommy? Rough crowd?" Tommy asked quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "You could say that." Maya ordered a glass of wine, then really looked at him. He couldn't be more than 22, with tired eyes, and the slightly desperate cheerfulness of someone working multiple jobs. "You go to school around here?" Tommy's face lit up with surprise that anyone had bothered to ask. "Community college. Trying to get into the nursing program, but it's competitive. The prerequisite classes are expensive, and with this job and my other gig at the coffee shop, ... He shrugged, clearly not wanting to burden a guest with his problems. "What's your other job?" Maya found herself genuinely curious, a welcome relief from the performative small talk she'd been enduring all evening. "I work mornings at a place near Roosevelt Middle School. You know it?" Maya nearly laughed. "I teach there. Art classes." Tommy's eyes widened. "No way. You're Ms. Chun?" "Dude, the kids talk about you all the time. My little sister goes there, Rosie Santos. She's always coming home talking about some project you're working on." "Rosie's your sister?" Maya's face broke into a genuine smile for the first time. "All evening. She's incredibly talented. Her sculpture work is just beautiful. Yeah, she loves your class. Says you actually listen to them, you know? Like, really listen." Tommy glanced around the room full of adults who had spent the evening talking past each other. "Bet that's not something you see much of here." Before Maya could respond, she felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Dr. Kim approaching, looking slightly awkward but determined. "I'm sorry about earlier," Dr. Kim said without preamble. "That was ... uncomfortable. I wanted to hear what you were saying about trauma-informed teaching. It's actually very relevant to my work." Maya studied the doctor's face, looking for signs of condescension or polite interest, but found only genuine concern. "Really?" "Really. I spend a lot of time with kids who've experienced trauma, and the ones who have access to art therapy or creative outlets seem to process their experiences more effectively. But the schools I work with are always struggling for resources." Tommy, who had been listening while continuing to serve drinks, cleared his throat. "My sister says Miss Chun got the school to start a program for kids whose parents are deployed overseas. Military families, you know? She said it really helped some of the kids who are having a hard time." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Dr. Kim said, her voice growing more animated. "Creative expression as a coping mechanism. But I bet you're doing it without any official support or funding." "Pretty much," Maya admitted. "I write a lot of grants, spend my own money on supplies, stay after school to give kids a safe space. It's not sustainable, but what else are you going to do?" "You're going to keep fighting," said a new voice. Maya turned to see a teenage girl approaching, elegant in a simple black dress that looked like it cost more than Maya's monthly salary. She had Connor's dark hair, but Eleanor's sharp eyes, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told to know her place. "Grace?" Dr. Kim smiled at the newcomer. I didn't know you were here. Aunt Eleanor insisted I come home from prep school for this, Grace said, rolling her eyes. I'm Connor's niece, and I've been listening to your conversation from over there. She gestured toward a group of adults who were pointedly not looking in their direction. Finally, someone saying something real at one of these things. Maya looked at this poised teenager who couldn't be more than 16 and felt a spark of recognition. You don't like these events much. I hate them, Grace said with refreshing honesty. Everyone pretends to care about helping people, but when someone who actually does the work shows up and tells the truth, they act like she's committed some terrible crime. It's hypocritical. Grace, Dr. Kim said gently, these events do raise money for important causes. Sure, but they also make everyone feel good about themselves without actually changing anything, Grace replied. I mean, look at tonight. Everyone's writing checks to help sick kids, but when Ms. Chun talks about helping kids before they get sick, by addressing poverty and trauma and educational inequity, suddenly she's being inappropriate. Tommy nodded vigorously, right? Like throwing money at the problem after it's already bad instead of fixing the things that make it bad in the first place. Maya looked around at this unlikely group, an overworked bartender, a pediatric surgeon, and a privileged teenager, and felt something loosen in her chest. You know what the crazy thing is? I came here tonight ready to bite my tongue and play nice. I bought this dress, practiced small talk, promised myself I'd be the version of me that Connor's family wanted to see. What changed? Dr. Kim asked. Margaret Thornfield told me to know my place, Maya said simply. And I realized I do know my place. It's not sitting quietly while people dismiss the work I do and the kids I serve. It's not pretending that systemic problems don't exist so wealthy people can feel comfortable. My place is being honest about what's broken and fighting to fix it. Grace grinned. I wish I could have seen Aunt Margaret's face when you said that. It was pretty satisfying, Maya admitted, though I think I might have ended my relationship in the process. If you did, Tommy said, wiping down the bar with perhaps more force than necessary, then maybe it wasn't the right relationship for you. Dr. Kim nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about the kids who don't have advocates. Would you be interested in collaborating on something? I've been trying to get the hospital board to fund more community outreach programs. Someone with your experience and passion could really help make the case. Are you serious? Dead serious? We need people who understand these communities, who can speak authentically about what kids need. Not people who think charity galas solve everything. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. I would love that. Cool, Grace said. And if you need someone to help with grant writing or research, I'm pretty good at that stuff. I've been looking for ways to do something meaningful instead of just showing up to these boring events. Tommy reached under the bar and pulled out a business card. And if you ever need help with anything at Roosevelt, let me know. I know a lot of the families in that neighborhood. Sometimes it's easier for them to hear from someone who gets it, Maya looked at the three faces surrounding her, all of them bright with possibility and genuine interest, and realized that this was what she'd been missing all evening. This was what real connection looked like, what happened when people stopped performing and started being honest with each other. Across the room, she could see Connor talking intently with his mother, their heads bent together in what looked like damage control planning. Eleanor kept glancing in Maya's direction with barely concealed irritation, while Connor looked like he was trying to solve a particularly difficult legal problem. I should probably go talk to them, Maya said, though she made no move to leave her new allies. Why? Grace asked bluntly. So you can apologize for telling the truth? Because that's what people expect. Screw what people expect, Grace said, with the fierce certainty of youth. You said something tonight that needed to be said. Don't take it back just because it made some people uncomfortable. Dr. Kim touched Maya's arm gently. Whatever you decide about your personal situation, I meant what I said about collaboration. The world needs more people willing to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. Maya nodded, feeling steadier than she had all evening. Then that's what I'll do. She didn't know yet what that would mean for her and Connor, or whether there was a way to bridge the gap between who she was and who his family wanted her to be. But looking at the faces around her, people who saw her passion as a strength rather than a liability, she knew she had found something more valuable, an acceptance from people who would never truly understand her. She had found her tribe. The ride home was silent, except for the sound of Connor's fingers drumming against the steering wheel. Maya stared out the passenger window, watching the city lights blur past, and waited for the conversation she knew was coming. That was quite a performance, Connor finally said as they pulled into his building's garage. Performance? Maya turned to look at him. Is that what you think that was? What else would you call it? You deliberately created a scene at my mother's event. You embarrassed me, embarrassed my family. I told the truth about my work and my values. If that embarrassed you, maybe you should think about why. They sat in the parked car, the engine ticking as it cooled. Connor ran his hands through his hair, the way he did when he was trying to solve a problem that had no clean legal solution. Maya, I love you, but this world, my family's world, it has rules. And tonight you broke every single one of them. Maybe the rules needed breaking. Connor was quiet for a long moment. My mother wants me to think seriously about whether this relationship is going to work long term. Maya felt something settle in her chest, heavy and final. And what did you tell her? I told her I needed time to think. Maya nodded slowly, understanding. Perfectly. You need time to think about whether you can love someone who won't shrink herself to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. That's not fair, isn't it? Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face him fully. Connor, tonight I met a doctor who wants to collaborate on programs for kids, a teenager who's passionate about social justice, and a bartender who's working 2 jobs to become a nurse. Real people doing real work to make things better. And you're worried about whether I followed your mother's social rules. 3 weeks later, Maya was in her classroom after school, working with Rosie Santos on a sculpture that would be displayed in the community center's new teen space, a project funded by Dr. Kim's successful pitch to the hospital board. Tommy had stopped by with coffee and updates about his nursing school application, which Grace had helped him strengthen with her research skills. The collaboration born from that disastrous gala night was already bearing fruit. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Stella. Coffee tomorrow? Want to hear about the community art program proposal? Maya smiled, gathering her supplies. She hadn't heard from Connor since their final conversation 2 weeks ago, when he'd told her he thought they wanted different things from life. She'd agreed, though she suspected they'd always wanted different things. She'd just been willing to pretend otherwise for a while. As she locked up her classroom, Maya caught sight of her reflection in the dark window. She was wearing her favorite vintage jacket and paint-stained jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, looking exactly like herself. No performance, no careful editing of her personality to fit someone else's expectations. She looked like a woman who knew her place and was exactly where she belonged.